Well, howdy everyone, and welcome to the brand new Lauren Muzyka show, your favorite update in the battle for life, family, and freedom. Thank you all so much for being with me. I'm Lauren Muzyka, attorney and human rights advocate, and I serve as president and CEO of Sidewalk Advocates for Life, the nation's largest peaceful sidewalk outreach organization. Okay, now that I got the fancy intro out of the way, on a personal note, I am so excited. This podcast has been a long time coming. For years now, I've been wanting to sit down and have a real, ongoing, in depth conversation with all of you about the heart of the culture battle. The issue of life, our first and most foundational right, because without life, we have nothing, right? And naturally joined to the issue of life is our identity as man and woman, mother and father, and the human family. Abortion, gender identity, sex, marriage, freedom, and more. These issues are also hot, hot, hot because they're intrinsic to who we are, what we believe, how we live our lives, and our very destiny. And once we're convinced of truth with a capital T, or I guess at least our position, right? There's a question about how we best present and talk about these issues, how we show up, advocate, educate, and influence others. Now, my particular expertise within the life issue is sidewalk advocacy, how you meet a woman facing an unexpected pregnancy in her crisis and fill her needs with life-affirming options and resources such that she is moved to choose life for her child. Every time that happens, abortion essentially ends in that moment, really regardless of what our state law is. And in reality, that is the crux question pro-life people must resolve: how we best reach a heart and mind and win them to life. If we can answer that question, we can gradually change a community, a state, a nation, and the world. And for those of us who call ourselves Christians, it's also particularly powerful to think that hitting the streets and winning people over to life abundant is as old as the gospel itself. The idea is that you and I, with the power of the Holy Spirit behind us, have an incredible opportunity to carry a life-saving, even soul-saving message to people in need. People that so often are tempted to choose the counterfeit when God Himself desires to give them so much more. And it's especially powerful knowing that you are an imperfect human being too, a sinner saved by God. And really, what a privilege to meet another hurting human being on the sidewalk outside of an abortion facility, the greatest crossroads of life and death in our world today, and share with that person the hope that you have. Now, for those of you listening who may not identify as Christian, pro-life, conservative, or really anything of the sort, please know I welcome you here too. While I may have a particular viewpoint myself, I do appreciate dialogue, and I'm excited to hear from you as the show develops and plan to address your POV questions and concerns as well. So right now, that's where we're starting, and I'm staying open to the show evolving with your input and God's help. Each week, we're going to cover the top issues in the battle over life and family and explore together how we best reach hearts and minds. Now, most of the time, here's what to expect. We'll do a ballpark 30-minute show with a special guest interview, and other weeks, we'll be doing a ballpark 10-minute hot take on something in the news. You might even get me in a few different settings and venues. But either way, I'll be here every Friday at 8 a.m. Central on Facebook Live, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. Okay, now I'm going to dial back for a second and tell you a little bit more about myself, because I figured if we're going to be hanging out every Friday morning, you have to know who you're hanging out with, right? So in a nutshell, I describe myself as a pro-life attorney, Christian, conservative, wife, dog mom, because the Lord hasn't given us children yet. I actually have 3 rescue pups, Porter, Dunkel, and Barley. I'm sure I will talk your ear off about them at some point because they are the best dogs in the whole world. I also love coffee. I'm famous for being a coffee gal, right? Love Dr. Pepper. Did I mention dogs? I love dogs. And living in the great state of Texas, or as I like to call it, the promised land. Of course, it's a proper term for Texas, right? Speaking of Texas, I'm also a fighting Texas Aggie. I earned a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and Spanish from Texas A&M, as well as an advanced certificate in International Affairs. I'm a 2009 cum laude graduate of Ave Maria School of Law, and I've interned with organizations including Alliance Defending Freedom, Americans United for Life, Liberty Institute, Texas Alliance for Life, and the Collin County District Attorney's Office. After graduating from law school, I served as campaign strategist for the National 40 Days for Life team, advising their 300 plus campaigns in North America, and at one point saw a need and felt the call to start Sidewalk Advocates for Life. We launched 10 years ago in 2014, and since then, Sidewalk Advocates for Life has grown to 282 locations. In other words, we have sidewalk advocate teams trained to reach out to mothers and fathers in crisis in front of 282 abortion and abortion referral facilities all over the United States, Puerto Rico, Mexico City, and Colombia. And we've now witnessed about 23,000 mothers and babies saved from abortion, helped 99 eternal souls leave the abortion industry, and aided the closure of 57 facilities. And we do what we do peacefully, prayerfully, and within the confines of our First Amendment rights. I tell people I absolutely love my job. I get to travel the country, speak at events and throughout various media outlets, and share the good news that sidewalk advocacy, this activity of meeting women in crisis and offering them love, care, and support, is not only saving lives and gradually ending abortion in communities all over the country, throughout the world, through the power of love, but literally changing the world itself. Now, you may be asking, how does an attorney end up leading a sidewalk outreach organization? That is a great question. As I mentioned before, I attended Texas A&M University, and the year before I got there, a brand new Planned Parenthood abortion facility had gone up in our little college town. And as you might imagine, the faithful were really grieved by it. I remember going to church, and the local peaceful pro-life activist organization, Brazos Valley Coalition for Life, was coming to services and asking people if they would consider taking just 1 hour a week to pray in front of the facility, to pray for the mothers and babies, and to give witness to what was really going on inside this building. And I remembered when this was presented to me, I had the thought, I can do that. I can pray 1 hour a week in front of this facility in hopes to save a life, like a drop in the bucket, right? Then not too long after that, some of us were invited to get trained as sidewalk counselors to learn how to reach out to the women going in with our words. So they brought in this beautiful Baptist woman from Georgia, Karen Black, who was famous for taking a very loving, woman-oriented approach, really as it should be. In fact, she coined the idea, the compass, so to speak, that we at Sidewalk Advocates for Life still use today of mom, baby, God. The idea that we got to start with mom, and when we address her crisis situation, then the rest of the conversation is unlocked to baby and to God. We would rather be in the other order, right? And that really is the natural order, God, baby, mom. But a woman in crisis mode has all that inverted. So learning this with Karen, it was revolutionary, so helpful, because she has to know that we care about her first before her heart is open to the rest of the conversation. And I remember what life was like on our side of the fence before this new thing called 40 Days for Life showed up, which I'll get to here in just a minute. But I remember a man coming to the public right of way, dressed up like the Grim Reaper, and he would pace up and down the sidewalk, presumably to shock people into what it was they were getting ready to do. There was a woman who would hold about a 30 times life-size photo of an aborted baby at the driveway, one of the most graphic images I've ever seen, presumably to knock people off their horse and show the world what abortion really was. There was another man who would bring a pole to the public right-of-way and stake it in the ground and raise the American flag as if to say, "I can't believe this is legal in our country." And I don't mean to comment on any one of those particular tactics at this juncture. We'll talk more about sidewalk outreach methodology another time. But what I will say is that collectively, it looked like a circus. It was like everyone was throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what would stick. Weird costumes, angry signage, unclear, even odd messages. And I was guilty by association. No one was coming to the fence to talk to me. And in fairness, I had no clear idea myself on what would turn a woman around apart from Karen's sidewalk counseling seminar. What is the perfect atmosphere to invite a woman into conversation? Of course, knowing what I know now, I can see that, yeah, duh, a woman in crisis isn't going to come to the fence and pour her heart out to the Grim Reaper, right? I mean, it's really something to think about. And I just remember watching woman after woman going in there, and so many Saturday mornings. Saturday morning was abortion morning in Aggieland. I was on my proverbial or sometimes literal knees praying, God, help me to reach these women. I will do whatever it takes. Short of something immoral, of course, I will dress up in a clown costume and dance in front of this facility if that's what it will take to save a life. So I prayed that prayer for a few years, and I remember when my prayer was finally answered. The staff at the Brazos Valley Coalition for Life, David B. Wright, my classmate Sean Carney, his wife Mary Lisa, and a volunteer named Emily, were frustrated too. They were getting the numbers back from the health department, and they realized that their efforts really weren't making a difference in the abortion numbers. So they decided to pray in their office around an old wooden table. And David said that their prayer was, God, we don't know what to do to end abortion in Aggie land, but you do. Show us what to do, and we'll do it. And what God laid on their hearts was this idea of 40 days for life, that God had used periods of 40 days throughout biblical history to bring about a transformation in his people. So think of Noah on the ark riding out the flood, Moses on Mount Sinai receiving the 10 commandments, Jesus spending 40 days with the disciples following his resurrection. So again, 40-day periods have been used throughout biblical history to change the game. They asked the question, what if? What if we covered this abortion facility for 40 days straight in prayer 24/7? Would we see transformation in Aggie land? So they went to the folks in the odd costumes and those with the angry signage, and they said, hey, we're going to try something. Would you consider just standing down for 40 days, and we're going to try making this simply a peaceful prayer vigil? So that's when the very first 40 Days for Life launched. It was the fall of 2004. And I have these beautiful memories of taking late night hours in front of the local abortion facility, praying with my friends from the local church, including my friend Peter, who's now my husband, and witnessing an unbroken chain of prayer in front of that facility. There was even another guy named David, a Knight of Columbus, who took the 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift every night for 40 days. I will never forget David and his sacrifice. And as a sidewalk counselor, this is so key. I watched the atmosphere go from something that was chaotic, apprehensive, and disorganized to something that was peaceful, prayerful, and purposeful. And suddenly, women were coming to the fence to talk. I tell people it's like a split A/B test. Like, let's try it this way and see how it goes. And now let's try it this way and see how it goes. And I wanted to shout from the rooftops that, oh my gosh, this works, right? That when we put away our odd tactics and just believe that prayer, peace, and love is enough, that we are enough, that's when miracles start to happen. Now, news of what took place in Aggieland got around, and 40 Days for Life slowly began to spread across the United States and the world. David B. Wright eventually took 40 Days for Life national, and a couple times a year, it hasn't been unusual now to see hundreds of peaceful prayer campaigns around the globe with incredible miracles as a result. By the way, in case this all sounds familiar to you, this whole journey is detailed in the book and movie Unplanned, the story of former Planned Parenthood director Abby Johnson. Abby, as she rose through the ranks of Planned Parenthood from abortion center escort eventually to becoming its director, she endured 6 40 Days for Life campaigns and was so moved by the prayer and peaceful outreach outside her former workplace, she eventually left after watching a 13-week-old baby fight and struggle for his life during an ultrasound-guided abortion that she assisted with. In that moment, she says the scales fell from her eyes and she realized what she had been a part of. And I tell people you cannot watch Abby's transformation, even from initially hating the people on the sidewalk to eventually finding refuge in them, and then not be wildly transformed yourself. The summer of 2006, I was preparing to head to law school, and it's a long story, but I somehow ended up as a full-time sidewalk counselor with the Dallas Diocese. And while there, I learned the Monsignor Riley method of sidewalk counseling and went around to, at the time, the 5 to 6 Dallas abortion centers to offer women in crisis options and resources. And that summer for me, again, it was so providential that I was a part of this, but it was life-changing. Many of my stories in Sidewalk Advocates for Life today, like when I give a training, come from my time in Dallas because we had such great access to the clients due to how often the public right of way was situated. So, again, I have tons of miraculous stories that would just blow you away. I was just so moved by the Monsignor Riley approach. It's very similar to Karen Black's method, right? So this is this amazing sidewalk counseling priest that put together this beautiful method called the Helpers of God's Precious Infants. His approach is very peaceful, and it's all about starting with the mother and offering the type of love, help, and support such that it plants seeds for a true change of heart. Really intrinsic to his approach is that we don't do anything that would get in God's way of being able to eventually work in that person's heart. He emphasizes there should be no element of protest, picketing, condemnation, or scorn, anything of the sort. We are solely focused on helping her spare herself from the pain of abortion and choose life and life abundant. Now, a few years later, I would also go on to learn the Chicago method of sidewalk counseling invented by the famous Joe and Ann Scheidler of Pro-Life Action League, who arguably helped invent sidewalk counseling in the 1970s. Now, that method prompts us to research lawsuits and even ambulances that may have been at this particular abortion facility and share that info with women considering abortion as a way to protect her physically and beyond. Of course, by the time I learned that method, really my third sidewalk counseling training, my wheels were turning. I realized studying all of this that the point of commonality between all these more successful sidewalk outreach methods was starting with mom, addressing her perceived crisis, thereby unlocking, again, more conversation about baby and even God. So, anyways, I graduate from law school in 2009 at the height of the financial crisis, by the way. And while job searching, I came back to sidewalk counseling with the Dallas Diocese for a few months and began interning at the district attorney's office in hopes to start out as a prosecutor. You know, even if I knew that I was headed to being a pro-life, pro-family litigator or lobbyist, I figured that that would be a really good foundation. And then they suddenly announced a hiring freeze. So, for fun, this is what fun is for pro-lifers, right? While I'm trying to hold my place as the next one to be interviewed at the DA's office, I decided to lead the Dallas 40 Days for Life campaign. And it was nothing short of amazing. It ended up being the largest vigil in the world. And after that 40 days, David B. Wright, the founder of 40 Days for Life, suddenly comes to me and invites me to join the 40 Days for Life national team as their campaign strategist, advising our teams across North America. And then he said something in that invite conversation, so to speak, that ended up being prophetic for my life. He said, Lauren, I can't promise you that this is all going to be legal work, but I do promise that the Lord will use your law degree. Lauren, I can't promise you that it's all going to be legal work, but I do promise that the Lord will use your law degree. So here I was, again, wanting to be a litigator, lobbyist in the culture battle, but realizing that if I took this leap of faith, if I said yes to this job, my resume was suddenly going to look very different. My career was going to take a whole different trajectory, right? And it might be hard to go back to a legal career and maybe one day work at a firm or related. So anyways, I would love to tell you that I said yes to this opportunity right away, but it took some time to think and pray about it. What's so interesting, what's so providential is that I was reading a book by a woman who had spent a summer with Mother Teresa, serving alongside of her in the home of the dying and the various orphanages that they had. And she said something in the book that I will never forget. She said, the things we consider to be great in the eyes of the world are not necessarily what's great in the kingdom of God. I'm going to say that again. The things that we consider to be great in the eyes of the world are not necessarily what's great in the kingdom of God. And I suddenly realized I was asking the wrong question. Instead of asking what can advance my legal career, shouldn't I be asking, in light of the fact that my legal education is a gift, how can I use that to save lives and souls? And if this boat into the culture battle looks a little bit different from what I had envisioned, who am I to say no? So, with that analysis, I joined the 40 Days for Life national team and for over 2 years loved serving as their campaign strategist, advising prayer campaigns in North America spiritually, strategically, even got the first blush at things legally. And then at one point saw a need and felt the call to start Sidewalk Advocates for Life, that just as 40 Days for Life had made this ready-made prayer vigil program for busy people who wanted to make a difference in the battle for life, could we provide a ready-made, comprehensive training tools and support program for people who wanted to reach out with their words, who wanted to interface more directly with the moms going in, connecting them with life-affirming resources in their community. So I launched Sidewalk Advocates for Life 10 years ago. And since then, at the time of this recording, we've witnessed all these crazy, awesome miracles simply because people like you said yes to this great mission of loving and serving mothers and families in crisis. You know, I tell people that showing up and praying is already half the battle, and then our words are icing on the cake. All right, now with that introduction, a quick State of the Union. We just had this seismic shift on abortion rights, so-called abortion rights, right? Roe versus Wade, the Supreme Court decision that imposed abortion on demand on all 50 states, had been the law of the land for nearly 50 years. And it was the Dobbs v. Jackson Supreme Court decision that overturned it all in June of 2022 and sent it back into the hands of the people. And I want to take a moment to thank you for helping to overturn Roe versus Wade. And here's what I mean by that. Law tends to follow culture, and culture is what? The hearts of the people, right? And as you all have chosen to pray, stand up, show up, advocate, and educate, you have helped to transform culture, and you made a Supreme Court decision like this possible. The courts are a microcosm of the culture, right? They're still made up of people. You were the yes to God that ushered in this miracle that so many for so long said would never happen, would never be possible. And here we are on the other side of history. Still, I don't need to tell you that we have work to do. And that's also why I decided to launch this podcast, to have a bigger conversation, because we've got dangerous, unregulated mail-order, abortion-causing drugs being shipped to women from Mexico and India. We've got an administration hell-bent on turning our corner pharmacies into abortion pill dispensaries with seemingly no concerns about DIY abortions at home or the trauma that comes with such a regimen. We've got Planned Parenthood's promise to deliver abortion vans to travel our state borders, dispensing the abortion pill, and even possibly soon doing surgical abortions aboard a bus. We've got a predatory abortion industry flooding into cities, often small cities at the border and pro-abortion states, turning many of our salt-of-the-earth communities into abortion destinations or abortion tourist areas, surely making the case for those of us in abortion-restricted states to maintain a presence at the abortion referral centers here, to reach as many mothers as possible before the industry pressures them to take the life of their child at a facility 300 or 600 miles away. And right now, we've got about 18 states that protect innocent human life, with about 32 to go. From here, what happens next, what each of us decide to do going forward as we respond to the greatest human rights movement on earth, that is our gift back to God. We at Sidewalk Advocates for Life are full steam ahead, working to cover all uncovered abortion and abortion referral facilities in the country with peaceful, loving, well-trained sidewalk advocates. And we're even going to be training a group of online sidewalk advocates to go into internet chat rooms and connect mothers in crisis with real options and resources before they're tempted to order dangerous mail-order abortion-causing drugs. I mean, the bottom line here, folks, is that there is a modern day Holocaust going on. 1 million lives are lost every year in this country alone to the greatest cause of death in the history of the world, abortion. Friends, it's not hard to see that mothers in crisis need us. Preborn children need us. Broken and hurting families need us. I encourage us to rise up and respond to the call that God has placed in front of us to be salt and light to a world in need. And as we do, I believe we will see post-Roe America gradually become an abortion-free America. Let's keep talking about that. All right, well, with that, it is time to wrap up our first show. Thank you all again for joining me for the inaugural episode of the Lauren Muzyka Show. We'll be back here next Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Central on Facebook Live, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts. Have a great week, everyone. Thank you for being with me. See you next week.